On our newscast tonight, more government ministries lay out their blueprints for 2015. Today, their focus was on the people's happiness, including ways to recognize dedication and hard work over credentials and creating more opportunities to enjoy arts and culture. Korea's Supreme Court upholds an appeals court ruling against Lee Seok-ki of the now-disbanded UPP. And at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang assures the world that Beijing is fine with last year's economic growth, even if it was below target, because they're aiming for quality and continued growth over the long term. These and more coming up, so stay with us.
It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday evening here in Korea. Hello and welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Lee Ji-yoon.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us tonight. We begin over at the nation's top office. Government ministries got together on the last day of their status reports to the president on this Thursday.
Yes, there the government talked about ways to encourage students to pursue their talents while also helping women take a more active role in the workforce. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
The action plans of the nation's education and employment ministries for the coming year focus on nurturing creative talent and building a society where workers are rewarded for their skills and not their credentials. For teenagers, the government aims to further promote its so-called free semester program, whereby middle school students are exempt from exams for a semester to give them time to enjoy other pursuits. As of 2014, 25% of middle schools nationwide had implemented the program. The ministry aims to increase that to 70% by the end of this year and to eventually expand it to every middle school by 2016.
Our ministry is helping facilitate the necessary procedures so that every sector of society, including economic, social, and cultural institutions, will open their doors to teenagers during their free semesters.
For the nation's young people, the government will increase the number of specialized vocational schools to help them find careers at an earlier age. The government will also encourage companies to list specific qualification requirements on their job postings so that job seekers and employers can avoid a mismatch. At the same time, the government hopes to increase women's economic participation in society. The women's employment rate in Korea is still lower than the OECD average, but the Gender Equality Ministry has plans for bringing the rate up.
The ministry plans to pressure companies to give a year of automatic childcare leave following 3 months of maternity leave without having to apply. Although we cannot force companies to adopt the system, we will try to give incentive to companies that implement it.
There are plans to set up new career centers for women with a variety of diverse career training courses. The training programs are expected to benefit over 17,000 women. The government will also increase the quantity and quality of daycare services, and the nation's daycare centers will be overhauled to follow stricter evaluation standards. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And the government's goals don't end there. It also wants to do more to promote and celebrate the Korean culture.
That's right. It was the culture minister's turn, and they said the key to doing that is to give people greater access to arts and cultural activities. Our Connie Lee tells us more.
Having a happy life through arts and culture. That's what Korea's Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism is promoting in their official plans for the new year. The ministry announced Thursday that one of its major goals is to add more avenues where people can enjoy the arts, especially on the nation's designated Culture Day.
Despite efforts to promote this day in its first run in 2014, we found out that the awareness level of Culture Day only stands at 30%. So this year, we plan to bring arts and culture to the people, especially those outside the city or in rural areas.
Culture Day falls on the last Wednesday of every month, and on this day you can get free admission or discounts to museums and galleries, and even discounts to concerts or theaters. And this year, more venues, at least 1,800 nationwide, will be participating in this monthly campaign. Another goal for Korea is to boost its national image by promoting its arts and culture to the world. According to an annual index of 50 developed countries, Korea ranks 27th in terms of national brand, with people around the world having more positive perceptions of Germany than any other country. One way Korea will try to improve its image is by joining this year's Milano Expo, a 6-month affair in the Italian city where 145 countries will gather to showcase ideas on food, science, and technology. The ministry also plans to spend more on Korea's tourism industry, from $22 billion in 2014 to $24 billion this year. With the new plans now set to go, the government can now only hope that they will contribute to the people's happiness this year. Connie Lee, Arirang News, Sejong.
Korea's Supreme Court has upheld a 9-year prison term and a 7-year ban on serving in parliament for Lee Seok-ki. He's the first sitting lawmaker to be convicted of treason since the 1980s. The former leftist lawmaker was found guilty of plotting to overthrow the South Korean government in the event of a war with North Korea. Our Kim Young-gil has the story.
At the close of a 17-month trial, former Unified Progressive Party member Lee Seok-ki was found guilty of instigating a rebellion among members of a secretive pro-North Korea group called the Revolutionary Organization.
Defendant Lee Seok-ki is found to be guilty of instigating a rebellion among members of a shadowy pro-North Korea group. However, he is acquitted of charges of sedition against the government due to a lack of evidence.
Prosecutors alleged that Lee had discussed plans to blow up major facilities in South Korea last year, such as communication lines and railways, with 130 members of the underground group. The top court also found Lee guilty of sympathizing with North Korea, which is a violation of South Korea's national security law banning any anti-state activities. However, the court ruled that there was not enough evidence to prove that the revolutionary organization actually existed. The court said the evidence was solely based on the testimony of informants. Right after the ruling was issued, both the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy said they respected the court's decision. However, the ruling party said Lee should have been found guilty of both sedition and conspiracy, while the opposition party said the court's decision should have come before a ruling last year that disbanded the Unified Progressive Party. Lee was a member of the UPP, which was indicted on charges of conspiring with members of the Revolutionary Organization. All 5 of the party's lawmakers, including Lee, lost their parliamentary seats last December when the party was dissolved. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And there's growing evidence that a young Korean who went missing in Turkey has joined the Islamic State militant group. The growing concern back here in Korea is that this might lead to other young people to follow Kim's alleged path. For more, here's Kwon So-ah.
Social networking services like Twitter and Facebook helped the young Korean who went missing in Turkey nearly 2 weeks ago now to learn about and possibly even join the Islamic State. It may have all started as curiosity when the 18-year-old Kim typed in words like Islamic State, Islam, and Syria into a search engine. So the concern is that as easy as it was for Kim to just turn on the computer and type, for young Koreans, falling into the arms of terrorists could be just a few clicks away. What's alarming is that Kim's Twitter continues to attract followers. The number has jumped 5-fold in recent days to more than 400, and is likely a lot of them have looked for similar information themselves.
These days, you just type in the words and it's easy to find information.
That's a really worrisome indicator because I'm pretty sure that the Korean teenagers, including the Kim boy, had no idea how violent the ISIS is and how gruesome they are and what the ISIS philosophy is, because the ISIS is based on Salafism, which is a very hardcore, strict interpretation of Islam.
Dr. Tang says the Islamic State has two main recruitment strategies. One is designed for hardcore devoted Muslims, the other is for those who need money. She says it's highly likely that Korean teenagers are targeted as they know there is a high internet penetration among the group, making them more vulnerable.
And I think there are very significant asymmetry within the Korean society. Unfortunately, our society, especially Korean media, are highly only focusing on the Korean Peninsula issue and Northeast security issue.
Experts say Korean society has to expand its perspective in order to provide young people with enough information on the truth about Islamic terrorist groups and be more vigilant about internet censorship. The incident has prompted the Korea Communication Standards Commission to announce Thursday it will monitor terror-related information on the web and pull down Islamic State recruitment pages. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, the trading conditions in Korea last year were at their most favorable since the year 2011. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the country's net terms of trade index for goods reached 89.94 in 2014. That's up 0.4% from the previous year. The improved trading conditions come as falling global oil prices pushed import prices down more drastically than export prices by 2.6% last year from a year earlier. Export prices dropped 2.2%. World leaders and businessmen gathered in the Swiss alpine city of Davos on Wednesday, kicking off this year's World Economic Forum. There, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said that China's slowing growth isn't too much to worry about. Our Song Ji-sun has this story.
The downward pressure is there, but Beijing will aim for quality and continued growth in the long term. Those were the words of the Prime Minister of the world's fastest-growing economy after the economy failed to meet the government target for the first time. The Chinese economy logged a 7.4% growth rate in 2014, the lowest in 24 years. Seeking to assure global leaders that China will bring more opportunities to the world if it continues to grow at a medium to fast speed for the next couple of decades, Li reiterated that he will pursue a prudent monetary policy and a proactive fiscal policy.
It must be noted that the moderation of the growth rate in China reflects a profound adjustment in the world economy, and it is also consistent with the law of economics. More importantly, we have made further progress on structural reforms. Needless to say, the Chinese economy will continue to face substantial downward pressure in 2015.
As the world's second largest economy sought to assure investors, the world's largest economy is picking up pace. In a survey by PricewaterhouseCoopers conducted before the forum kicked off, CEOs attending the meeting indicated that the U.S. now seems a more attractive market than China by 38 to 34%. This marks the first time the U.S. has come out on top since the firm started conducting the poll 5 years ago. With the IMF having lowered its global growth outlook to 3.5% this year from an earlier forecast of 3.8%, deflation in the Eurozone, structural reforms, and income inequality will be among the major issues discussed at the Davos Forum this year. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Well, over the past few days, we've been taking a look at Korea's startup fever.
Yes, but today we turn our focus to Israel, a relatively small country in terms of geography and population, but a world leader when it comes to fostering startups.
That's right. Our Connie Kim shows us how this became possible for Israel.
Israel has over 60 IT startups listed on the NASDAQ. That's more than the combined total number of startups from Europe, China, Japan, and Korea. And this comes on the back of the country's strong R&D gene. Scientists and technicians per capita in Israel are nearly double those in the U.S., helping Israel's innovative city, Tel Aviv, become the second best startup ecosystem in the world after California's Silicon Valley. And experts say the country's unique chutzpah culture, or pioneer spirit, also plays an important role in creating venture capital buzz. But helping to weave these elements together is the government. Through seed investments, it's been supporting the core technology of startups, hard and costly to build up, but regarded as critical for development.
they are heavily investing in this very, very risky stage where usually commercial organizations are quite averse to investing in this area.
Israel's first venture capital firm was established in the mid-1980s. By 1993, the government collaborated with the private sector to form Yozma, one of the country's largest venture capital funds. Luring in foreign venture capitalists by offering tax incentives and doubling investment through a government matching program, Yozma managed over $220 million in its 3 funds.
Israel's venture capital funds take bold steps in making risky investments, but that's not the case in Korea, where investors have high expectations on retrieving the money they put in.
Creating a favorable environment for new businesses, Yozma also helped to connect and oversee the acquisition of local startups by global corporations such as Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and Cisco. In 2013, the acquisitions and IPOs of Israeli companies far exceeded $6 billion, while startups totaled more than $2 billion in venture funding. With the right conditions to flourish, market watchers say there's a good chance the next Facebook or Google will emerge from Israel. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korean activists said they would refrain from flying anti-North Korean leaflets over the border at the start of the year. But earlier this week, another group did it again.
Well, this is just one of many groups in and outside of Korea dedicated to reminding the world that something more must be done about the dire situation in the north.
And regardless of their noble goals, some fear their actions could do more harm than good. And joining us in the studio today is Thor Halvorsen, president of the Human Rights Foundation. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first up, Thor, the first very general question we would have for you is, I guess this will be at the tip of everyone's minds. How effective are these anti-North Korean propaganda leaflets? Or is it just the act itself? It's supposed to be meaningful to get the attention from outside of North Korea and
It's
South
a good
Korea.
question. And if you talk to North Korean defectors that received the leaflets, and they tell you, I received the leaflets, and it was the first time that I could imagine that there was a different world, or that the South Koreans would not kill me if I defected, a lie that is spread in North Korea regularly. If you talk to those people, the leaflets are very effective. Leaflets are only one of many different ways of getting information into North Korea and having people enjoy the opportunity of peering outside the hermit kingdom, finding out other things that they had no idea about. In some cases, cartoons. In some cases, it's fiction. In some cases, it's photographs. Everyone has a different story of what moved them to change, to seek a different life, or to oppose the government.
Right. Well, back in the 80s or the 70s, we had the other way around working in terms of leaflets being flown. North Koreans were flying leaflets to South Korea. How would you compare the effects of this and that?
Well, they actually, historically speaking, they were both doing it. Both governments are doing it. The southern government was doing it. The dictatorship in the south was flying them north, and the dictatorship in the north was flying them south. Now, this was certainly not something that the various Korean groups invented. This has been used in Europe, in Eastern Europe. It was a way of getting information across the Iron Curtain into East Germany, for instance, into countries that are living under Soviet dictatorships. So are they effective? Yes, but the key is they have to contain the truth. And the truth is a very powerful weapon. It is one that engages in nonviolence, and one that is clearly, after seeing how the North Korean government responds to this, clearly a weapon that they're afraid of.
Okay. Well, do you think the South Korean government has the power to stop you or other activists from flying these leaflets across the border? Because what we've seen before is that the government seems to be concerned about these leaflets, perhaps maybe it could raise tensions on the Korean Peninsula, but at the same time, they don't seem determined to actively intervene in this issue.
Well, to respond to your question, do they have the power to stop us? Well, of course, they're a government. They have guns. They can most certainly, they have the power to do it. Do they have the authority to do so is another matter. The Constitution of the Republic of Korea allows freedom of expression. And certainly what these activists are doing, whether it's by sending USBs or DVDs or leaflets and educational material, do they have the authority to stop that? I do think that there's a case to be made, quite effectively, that if the North Korean government retaliates because a public launch is done and a balloon is sent up publicly on 4 p.m. on a Tuesday and it's announced, and the North Korean government retaliates with gunfire, that can affect people in those local areas. And in those cases, I think that these balloon launches should be done in private. They should be done in a clandestine manner. But other than that, I don't think that there should ever be illegal to send information and share, no different than it would be for me to hand out leaflets outside this television station.
It's really well publicized before and during and after your group or any other group tries to conduct these activities. So people are wondering, is it necessary for you to attract so much media attention, or is it your intention, or does it serve a purpose, or could you actually work without all that media hype?
Well, the 2 balloon drops that occurred earlier in the month had nothing to do with the Human Rights Foundation, so that's certainly not that criticism can be aimed at them. The balloon drop that we did was not announced in advance, so we announced it the day after, and we had a press conference the day after, and we certainly think that that matters. Why it matters so much is because the North has sent assassins to kill the people doing it. That should give you a sense of why it matters so much to them and how effective this is. The North Korean people are starving for this information. They want this information. They ask for this information. And many of them are willing to risk their lives in order to get it.
Okay. Well, you know, let's briefly talk about the movie, The Interview. I guess North Korea is not very happy about that movie. But you guys were originally going to send or fly these movies, DVDs, to North Korea, but didn't. Why? Why
we certainly are going to.
Okay.
Oh, we most certainly are going to.
Will it be effective?
Now, is it going to be effective? In speaking yesterday with a person who was in charge of the equivalent of the psychological operations unit at the very high levels of the military of North Korea, he described the film's effect as that of having a nuclear bomb effect in the mind of a North Korean about its government. Now, you have to consider the absurdity, the fact that we're talking about how a single movie, a comedy, that in some cases is funny and in some cases not that funny, a movie is upsetting a government so much that they have a 3-star general in charge of a task force to stop it from getting into the country. That tells you a lot about the North Korean government. And it tells you, I mean, if they're that afraid of comedy, oh my goodness, what would they do to drama and fiction?
Well, I am deeply concerned about the level of insecurity the country has. So we could be, I guess, shaking up the hornet's nest a little bit. I do hope we could approach it somewhere halfway between, the direct and aggressive approach and a little bit more gentler tact. That's just my personal.
And the gentler tact involves what? Sending them more money? Sending them sending them hookers, money, and whiskey?
Something in between what you were doing and what the government
What is
doing.
in between, though? Well, the in between, there are 20-something million people living in the most totalitarian, oppressive nation in the world, and people in South Korea seem to want to avoid even discussing it. It makes them uncomfortable. They have relatives up there. Let's not talk about it. Let's not even go there. We need reform and moderation and dialogue. Anyone who talks like that should be willing to spend a year in North Korea living in the same conditions that the North Koreans live.
Speaking with great empathy, thank you so much for joining us today
and for having me.
Correcting a certain, I guess, flawed perception of your activities today. Thor Halverson, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you back here someday again.
Have me back and visit hackthemback.com if you want to learn more. Hackthemback.com.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Unseasonably mild weather is keeping us warm these days, but with the readings going way beyond the average, it's not a good sign.
That's right. It almost seems like a sign of global warming to me. But for details on the causes and effects and preventive measures, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. First of all, 2014 was the warmest year ever recorded, and the global average temperature in 2014 was about 0.69 degrees Celsius above the 20th century average. Now, it doesn't sound much, but in global context, it matters quite a lot. And right now, it's causing serious problems with decreasing crops due to the sudden climate change and the loss of habitat from inundations. So let's try and change simple daily actions in ways we can conserve and reduce waste by following these simple tasks. But meanwhile, comfortable weather is expected all throughout the week, and mild highs are expected until Sunday evening, where rain is in store for us again, so make sure to plan your weekends accordingly. Now to our readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Friday morning at -4 and gets up high at 6 degrees. Meanwhile, the southern regions such as Daegu and Busan will top out at 8 and 9 degrees. Moving over to other regions such as Jeju Island gets up high at 9 as well. Dokdo hits down to 3, while Namgungang dips below 0 at -4 degrees. That's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
All right, that does it from us on this Wednesday. For those of you here in Korea, get home safely and have a great evening. I'm Lee Ji-yoon.
And this has been Daniel Che. Thank you for watching. Do join us again for more. Same time tomorrow.